Behind the headlines, according to a new study, Black girls in America are seen as more mature and less deserving of protection than other students. Harmful effects include young Black girls treated more harshly than their white peers.
It really became salient to me when I had my own children. And I would listen to some of the language that their teachers were using or their physician was using to kind of characterize their behavior or their appearance.
Dr. Jamelia Blake is an associate professor in educational psychology at Texas A&M University.
When we talk about children being mature in a positive light, we talk about them being precocious or advanced or gifted. But if one of my daughters or one of their friends was doing something that the teacher believed was advanced age, well, they're too grown. They know too much information.
This attitude is the focus of a study co-authored by Dr. Blake called Listening to Black Women and Girls, Lived Experiences of Adultification Bias.
In the initial study, we found that adults perceive Black girls as more adult-like and less innocent as early as the age of 5 years old. So what we found is, as young as potentially the age of kindergarten, adults, including potentially teachers, could be looking at a Black girl and responding to her as if she's older than she really is.
Rebecca Epstein, executive director at Georgetown University Law Center on Poverty and Inequality, was the other lead on the study.
What that translates into is less leniency, not giving Black girls second chances, not treating them as if they're children, and with the innocence that we typically associate with girls.
Blake and Epstein interviewed Black women of different ages who all shared similar stories of how adultification bias influenced their lives growing up.
What was powerful, though, was that there was a consistency to the stories from our youngest participants, our youngest was 12 years old, to our older participants who are older than the age of 60. So across generations, this is a consistent experience for Black girls.
The roots really come from racism, right? The legacy of slavery and historically us dehumanizing Black people, right? And so this idea that Black children are not really children.
And researchers say this adultification bias results in young Black girls being likely to receive more severe punishment compared with other students.
Black girls are suspended at over 5 times the rate of white girls nationally. And similarly, Black girls are treated more punitively along most of the key decision-making points in the juvenile justice system as well.
Dr. Blake says when she first started noticing this phenomenon affecting her daughters, she didn't know how to respond.
And I don't think at that time, especially when my girls were young, I had that awareness. And when I reflect back, I'm like, that's exactly what was happening, that they were exhibiting this bias.
She hopes this study can serve as a roadmap for parents trying to navigate these biases.
I hope it creates awareness and gives parents and teachers and mental health professionals and social workers some kind of language to begin this conversation, and also to really think critically and reflect on their own perceptions and how they're interpreting behaviors.
So, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, explain this to me, slavery and adultification. Is it because was it white slave owners justifying their raping of 12-year-old Black girls, slaves back then? Spell out the link for me.
Well, that link goes back far too far, it seems to me, to be able to be traced to today. And I appreciate the attention to Black girls, but I have to say that if you were to compare Black boys to white boys, it might not be called adultification, but you would find huge gaps as well. So this comparison of girls to girls, one race to another, is not particularly compelling to me because it is as expected. I'd want to look, though, closely at the girls, just as I'd look closely at the boys. And by the way, the bigger concern in the African American community is about Black boys who are behind Black girls in almost every respect. I have a whole commission on Black men and boys. So I'd really want to look with what it is that keeps Black girls from feeling fully equal to do what she has to do. I'd look at how she's treated in school. I would forget this thing about home. I'd look with what happens when she comes into the wider world and try to focus there. That's where you can get people treated equally.
I appreciate all of your comments, and I agree with you on so much. I will say that there's a social angle to this, and people will not like what I say when I say this, but we often glorify videos of little girls and babies dancing in frankly sexualized ways because it's cute. But it's not cute, and we're teaching girls about using their bodies.
So it's more cultural.
I think there's a cultural angle to it. It's not entirely that,
White
but I do
girls
think
do that kind of stuff.
they do, but somehow it gets more attached to black girls, maybe because of the body shapes and body types that tend to develop maybe a little bit more. So I think there's a role for us as parents to really be careful about what we consider cute and put out on social media. I think there's a role for parents in this.
There's a big problem across the board of sexualizing of little girls. But I think what's so interesting about this study is because a lot of this came up during the whole R. Kelly scandal. They were saying that the reason he didn't get prosecuted sooner or he wasn't behind bars sooner is because he was doing this with so many underage black girls and that they weren't viewed with the same kind of sympathy.
But if you look at some of his videos, and he's not the only rapper,
Yeah.
but I mean rapper videos of black women, to me, it's disgusting what a lot of white musicians do to white women in those videos. But when you see some of them with basically not clothed at all and wiggling all parts of their intimates all over the place, and I wonder how much that plays into it.
So per the R. Kelly point, I mean, we are also seeing this with Jeffrey Epstein, who has this, his predilection were for more thin, white, blonde girls.
Yeah.
And if we just go back and we look at the media coverage of that case when he got that initial deal, it was described as prostitution. A 14-year-old girl does not have the ability to consent to sex, much less with a millionaire or a billionaire. Yet, I'm not denying that race isn't a component of it, specifically for the reasons that you were saying, with regards to perhaps if a black girl if she develops in puberty earlier, perhaps there are more biases, and of course the legacy of just slavery and racism and justifying the sexual slavery of women is a component. But
Quickly, because we have to go.
But could it just be more that as a culture we are willing to turn a blind eye away from victims of people in power, of victims of people like R. Kelly or like Jeffrey Epstein?
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.